Okay, welcome. Welcome to today's webinar about building monarch habitat capacity. We're going to give people just a few more minutes to show up because not quite everybody's here, so please be patient. We'll be ready to start shortly. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Mary, would you like to welcome everyone?
Absolutely. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome. We're so glad you could be with us. Welcome to the Okies for Monarchs Building Monarch Habitat Capacity webinar with butterfly advocate Jane Breckinridge. We are so thrilled that more than 180 of you registered to join us today as part of our mission to educate, inspire, and empower Oklahomans to do more to help conserve pollinator species and their vital habitats. I'm Mary Waller, and for the past 2 years, I've had the honor of serving as the State Director of the Oklahoma Monarch and Pollinator Collaborative. Most of you may know this consortium by our education campaign name, which is Okies for Monarchs. We were formed in the fall of 2016 by more than 30 organizations that came together to draft a statewide plan of best practices to help the declining monarch species. Our guest speaker, Jane Breckinridge, was part of that historic original summit in Oklahoma City 3 years ago. And by that time, she had been working in the butterfly education and land stewardship arena for many years. Before we get to Jane's presentation, I'm going to share just a few housekeeping details about our webinar. First, as audience members, and because so many of you have tuned in today, we're delighted, everyone will be in the mute mode throughout the entirety of the webinar. Jane will present for about 45 to 50 minutes, and then we will transition into a question and answer period. You can ask questions of Jane via the chat box on the monitors in this webinar platform, or by emailing them directly to me. I'll keep an eye on that inbox. My email address is Waller, W-A-L-L-E-R, at oklahomaconservation.org. We will get to as many of your questions as possible after Jane's presentation. If for any reason a listener needs to leave the webinar before we are done, needs to go leave their computer just for a few minutes, or needs to leave early, please feel free to do so. You can leave the meeting by simply closing or exiting from your GoToMeeting app. And rest assured you won't miss a thing because we will be archiving today's webinar, posting it later this afternoon on our Facebook page, and posting it later this month on our website. So let's get started. For those of you not familiar with our speaker's accomplishments, allow me to share just a few highlights about Jane. Prior to raising pollinators, Jane spent more than 3 decades enjoying a successful career working in the magazine publishing industry. She graduated from Macalester College in Minnesota with a degree in political science. And it was while up north that she met her husband, David Bolkin. Jane's roots run deep in Oklahoma, and that's a story I'll let her share a little bit about with you today if she chooses. We are all so very fortunate to be the beneficiaries of Jane's love of family, respect for the land, and her new dream that called her back to northeastern Oklahoma. Jane and David are co-founders of the Uchee Butterfly Farm in Leonard. That's just east of Bixby in a horseshoe bend of the Arkansas River on 160 acres that are lovingly operated by citizens of the Muskogee Creek Nation. There, this couple specializes in rearing butterflies native to Oklahoma on her family's 5th generation tribal land allotment, which includes some undisturbed portions of original tallgrass prairie. Jane describes butterfly farming as the perfect opportunity to conserve native Oklahoma plants and animals, and to honor her own and others' native heritage and lands. In addition to establishing the working farm, she spent the last 20 years exhibiting butterflies throughout the United States and Canada. While I don't quite know where she finds all the time and energy, another big part of her work is as co-facilitator of the Tribal Alliance for Pollinators, also known as TAP. She will tell us more about the Alliance in just a moment. You may not know that our tribes have been leaders in the protection and advocacy of precious landscapes and resources, as well as at the forefront of landscape habitat restoration for a very long time. Since returning to Oklahoma, Jane has diligently and respectfully built relationships and forged teaching opportunities with more than 29 unique Oklahoma tribes. Working with Monarch Watch to form TAP, with co-founder and Monarch researcher, Dr. Chip Taylor of Kansas University, their team has provided resources and skills training to support pollinator habitat restoration to 7 participating Oklahoma tribes. Her farm and accomplishments at TAP have been recognized around the country and around the globe, and she'll tell us a little bit about how the partnership has earned grants from groups such as the U.S. Department of Fish and Wildlife and the Bureau of Indian Affairs. Jane, I am so very grateful you were able to make time for us today and our participants, and I'm going to turn over the reins of the program to you. I'm going to sit back and I'm going to learn along with our listeners.
Okay, well, thank you, Mary. That was quite the introduction. I wasn't really expecting that, but thank you very much. So, gosh, I was going to do an introduction of myself. Maybe I don't think I really need to do that now. But so I'll tell you all a little bit about the farm. So we are. Hang on one second here. One second while we get our technical difficulties in line. There we go. So, Bucci Butterfly Farm. We are a butterfly farm, obviously, but we're a lot more than that. And in addition to currently being closed down because of the COVID situation, but we are a conference center. We're just completed a 5-year project to expand our capabilities. So we're a conference facility now. Our conference facility backs out onto our land, including a original native prairie remnant that we use as a teaching facility. We have demonstration gardens where we show people how to plant and take care of native plant restoration on small scale for kind of projects that would be appropriate to, anything from tribal complexes to anywhere. We also have an indoor flight house, which is USDA licensed. And when our flight house does not have butterflies in it, it doubles as our dining hall for our conference events. We have 3 greenhouses. We produce plants, tens of thousands of milkweeds and native nectar forbs every year. Our greenhouses are also a teaching facility for Creek youth, and also for tribal staff members and tribal members of all kinds. So we are also producing plants. As you can see, we have outdoor facilities to do that as well. We also have a lab where we do small group work and training, and so that's also part of our complex. The signature program for our for the farm is Natives Raising Natives, and that was a program that we launched back in, 2013, 2014 now. And the Natives Raising Natives program uses butterfly farming as a hands-on teaching tool for all sorts of things to accomplish all sorts of goals. So the first is to obviously do economic development. We train our Creek citizens. I'm a Creek citizen, and we train Creek citizens to raise butterflies on their own land. We provide all of the training, all of the supplies, and then as a part of the program, we agree to buy back everything that they raise. It's based on a program that we have worked with for many years in Costa Rica. We've worked with them for, 25 years now, where people in those areas, those tropical areas, they are given training and supplies to raise tropical butterflies as an alternative to logging off rainforests. So that's been a very successful program we've worked out with for a lot of years. And starting, about 6 or 7 years now ago, we launched something similar here. With the Creek Nation, which is the fourth largest federally recognized tribe in the country, we were originally, our homelands were in Alabama and Georgia before we had forced relocation up here on the Trail of Tears. When the Indian territories were dissolved, the Indian Territory was dissolved to make way for the state of Oklahoma. Each enrolled tribal member got 160 acres as compensation, and our farm is located on my great-grandmother's original allotment that she got when she was a 16-year-old girl. As Mary said, I'm the fifth generation to farm here and the first to farm butterflies. Many of these allotments, these Creek Nation allotments, are unsuitable for traditional agriculture. They're all sandstone and post oaks and hickories, and not good for traditional agriculture. So butterfly farming is a kind of sustainable agriculture that works with nature instead of against it. So through this program, we can provide employment. Second goal of Natives Raising Natives is to provide a hands-on tool to engage youth, particularly Native youth, in science. Kids that might not otherwise pick up a science book get pretty excited when they start working with butterflies and caterpillars. It's also involved with nature and making those kind of connections. The third goal of Natives Raising Natives is to promote awareness of the need to conserve native species of butterflies and the habitats that support them. So this is a shot from a few years ago at our exhibit at the Tulsa State Fair. That's ours too. We exhibit butterflies in addition to raising them. And so what we've seen over the many years of doing this is that when people actually engage with the butterflies, it really changes something to them, about them. So I can talk about habitat restoration endlessly, and it's very clinical, and people tune out a lot. But when I'm in one of our exhibits and people are holding a beautiful butterfly, and you explain to them these butterflies are going to probably be gone in 10 or 20 years off the face of the planet if we don't get busy and start supporting them better with habitat to make their continuation possible. It changes things. It absolutely changes things for people. So that's a big part of our mission. By having more native butterflies out there, we can just spread the word more effectively. We raise all sorts of different species here at the farm. Pipevine swallowtails, red admirals, eastern black swallowtails, red spotted purples, buckeyes, eastern black swallowtails, polyphemus moths. I love moths. And of course, monarchs. It's all about the monarchs. So our story today starts with a butterfly, a monarch butterfly. Actually, more than a butterfly, with several 100 million butterflies that went missing from the population. Back in the winter of 2013, 2014, the monarch butterfly population hit a critical record low. Just for a point of comparison, in the fall of 1996, you had over 900 million monarch butterflies make the journey down to Mexico to the overwintering grounds. By the fall of 2013, that number was closer to 33 million. And so it was just an absolute shocking drop. And so we've been working through our Natives Raising Natives program on raising awareness of the need for conservation for a long time. We've been working on that. But after those numbers dropped, our focus became really on monarchs as it needed to be. It was especially worrisome after the Monarch Butterfly Recovery Plan was released by USDA, talking about the most important areas that needed to happen for habitat to recover the monarch butterfly population. And as you can see, there we were, right in the heart of the critical zone. And with really, for the most part, much of our state is really, really badly degraded in terms of habitat. It's pretty much a sea of Bermuda and fescue here, and cedar. So this is a critical area that the monarchs need for, as the returning migrants come out of Mexico in the spring. They need to come to Oklahoma and Texas to find milkweed to lay their eggs on. Every female monarch can lay between 200 and 400 eggs. So it's very critical that they find it here, because if they don't, then the loss is multiplicative. We need them. We need to send on a big healthy population so they can get to those summer overwintering grounds, and then when the fall, when they come back, they, as a part of this epic journey of up to 3,000 miles, they need to gain weight on this migration, which means they have to fuel up heavily here as they funnel down and go through Oklahoma. And if we don't have good habitat here, they're not going to make it, because they need to not only have enough energy to make that very long journey, but they also have to have the fat reserves to live off all winter long. So we're critical for a lot of reasons, and unfortunately, just not having those good native prairies, native grasslands like we used to. So one of the, in thinking about all the work that needs to be done here and really being the heart of the critical zone, one thing that we did have going for us is something very unusual about Oklahoma, which is that we're home to 39 federally recognized tribes. And the majority of the Monarch flyway through our state is also on tribal land. It's on dual jurisdiction tribal land. And in our work out there, working with different tribes and conservation, and out there doing, habitat restoration awareness, all that kind of stuff with the tribes, I never once had a tribal leader ask why we needed to save the monarch. The only question I ever got was how. And that was different than some of the other groups that I was working with out there doing monarch conservation, because a lot of people don't like, or particularly back then, didn't like milkweed too much, and getting some pushback. But with the tribal community, the only question was how. Okay, how are we going to do it? And that was actually a pretty good issue to raise, because even though we'd been doing this a long time and been raising milkweed a long time, and working these issues, the scope of what was needed to be done here was really huge. So back in 2013, at a International Butterfly Breeders Association conference, I had the pleasure and honor of meeting Dr. Chip Taylor, who was doing a presentation about monarch conservation and the need for habitat restoration. And so I got in touch with him and contacted him and said we wanted to create a monarch migration trail on tribal lands through Oklahoma, and would he be interested in helping? And he said, that's a very cool idea and it's very appropriate, but you're going to be limited by the capacity issue. And this was the first of many, many, many conversations about the capacity issue, by which he meant we did not have the seed resources for milkweeds. We did not have any greenhouses, organic greenhouses, to grow these milkweed plugs. Plugs were like slightly bigger seedlings that do better out in the field. We didn't have seed resources for milkweeds. We didn't have greenhouses to grow them out the plants. We didn't have seed resources for the native nectar plants that were needed for the restoration. We didn't have greenhouses for those. We didn't have anybody that was trained how to do the work. And I think there was some other long list of things that we did not have. But somehow convinced him that the tribes were ready and willing and able to step up and to try and address that capacity issue here in Oklahoma, and had the infrastructure to make that possible. And having sophisticated tribal governments, having environmental departments, having land resources. They had a lot of assets going for them to try and tackle this issue that so badly needed to be tackled for Oklahoma. So Tribal Environmental Action for Monarchs was born. It was a partnership. We first started talking about it in, 2014. We got our first grant and started launching in 2015. 7 tribes, and plus Monarch Watch and Uchi Butterfly Farm. Started out with a small grant from Monarch Joint Venture, and then in, mid-2015, we got a much larger grant from National Fish and Wildlife Foundation to expand and formalize what came to be known as the TEAM, the Tribal Environmental Action for Monarchs. And along the way in forming that coalition, we had really critical support from Dr. Carol Crouch, our USDA and RCS State Tribal Liaison, who helped us put together this coalition, was really instrumental in making that happen, and leadership from the Chickasaw Nation Cultural Center Horticultural Department, who had a lot of experience already growing out native plants and had been doing this work and so generously gave of their time and resources to help train everybody else and show the way. And then Joanne Ryan from Tishomingo National Wildlife Refuge, who also had a lot of experience with native plants and so generous about sharing those resources. So the 7 tribes that were part of the original team: Chickasaw Nation, Seminole Nation, Osage Nation, Muskogee Creek Nation, Eastern Shawnee, Miami Nation, and Citizen Potawatomi Nation, plus Monarch Watch and Uchee Butterfly Farm. So by the numbers, Tribal Environmental Action for Monarchs project, each tribe pledged 50 acres of habitat for restoration. Over the course of the project, we planted 50,000 milkweed plugs back. We planted, and then field planted the 30,000 native nectar plants that had been specifically targeted to well support monarchs, particularly during the fall migration period. And we created a seed bank to try and address the capacity issue for that with 154 native plant species that are seed banked. The project, while we were, all about, these numbers and restoring habitat, the most important thing that we were trying to do with this was to build capacity for habitat restoration work in Oklahoma. So to that end, heavy emphasis on equipment, supplies, and native seed resources, getting those developed, and an emphasis on train the trainer, with the whole idea that if we could just get these tribal staff trained or tribal members trained, then that knowledge can go back to all those different tribes and then be shared within those entities. So 7 tribes, 7 different approaches. That turned out to be a really interesting part of this whole project, because I assumed that this would just be something that was put in, in the environmental department and, and whatever. But I knew, obviously, 7 different tribes. You got different culture, language, history, culture with a capital C, culture with a small c, in every way different. But every tribe came at this so very differently, much more than I expected, beyond the obvious differences of just different history, language, culture. Many of the tribes, I think we had one that went through the environmental department. Over half of them, the lead on this project was coming out of the cultural department. This is a cultural issue. It's about sovereignty and preservation of our history, and how we treat our lands is an assertion of our sovereignty. And with with tribes, there is, for most tribes, a different value, or it's a distinct value, I will say, on how we treat our land. So there was, that was just a surprise, and just even trying to get through tribal resolutions through different governing bodies. Anyway, it was really interesting. But I guess probably the one that really stuck with me the most was Assistant Chief Lewis Johnson of Seminole Nation. At one of our kickoff meetings, everybody was asked to talk about why they were doing this, and he said, "We Seminole people were recently endangered ourselves, and now that the butterflies are in trouble, it's our turn to lend a hand and help them." So I think for a lot of us, that became kind of a watchword about about how and why we do this. And there he is, Assistant Chief Lewis Johnson. He didn't just talk about it; he really went out there and did it too. A huge commitment to this. So capacity building. How do you do this? We had people from most of the people who were involved in this project had no horticultural experience. They definitely had no experience like restoring land. Most of them weren't even biologists. As I said, most of them were coming out of the cultural department. So this is all about training, train the trainers. So we started out up in Lawrence, Kansas, and that was in early 2016. And every tribe of the 7 tribes in the partnership set representatives up, and we went up to Lawrence, Kansas, to KU and to Monarch Watch, and we spent 3 very, very intensive days training. We did classroom training, and we trained in the greenhouse. We were fortunate enough to be able to train with Elliot Demler, who at that time was the Director of Applied Ecological Services, which is the nursery that produces all the milkweeds for Monarch Watch, or at least in that region. And they're also a very, very, very sophisticated, large part of a large corporation that does native plants. So this nursery we were training produces over 1 million native plants per year. So they're very, very sophisticated, and they let us come in. And Elliot came into the classroom and made us go to the greenhouse and practice transplanting things. So that was really useful. So the next part, after we got done with our initial training, it was time to come back to Oklahoma and start implementing this. And our whole premise for this thing, which Dr. Taylor developed, was thinking about a habitat island concept. We had limited resources, very limited resources, so doing large-scale restoration of every plant was just not going to be possible. We also went into it. He was very set on this, and everybody has followed along, is that we needed to use seeds that were collected as close as possible to where they were going to be planted back. So, for instance, you can order, there's some very, very good companies that produce native seeds. One of the best ones is Prairie Moon up in Minnesota. But those plants, so I can order a purple coneflower from Prairie Moon, but those are not going to be seeds that originated here, and they're not going to have those micro adaptations that are going to be necessary to survive our climate. If you spent any time in Oklahoma, it's a real challenge if you're a plant. It's either flooding or it's too hot. There's a lot of challenges. So we wanted to also to restore it back to what was here. And what was originally here was not plants from Minnesota. They were plants from here. So we had to think about creating those seed resources and then creating these habitat islands. The habitat island, every tribe went through and designated 20 to 50 of these, and then cleared out all the non-native vegetation on a plot, anywhere about roughly 40 by 40. Killed out all the non-native vegetation. It looks pretty bad when it's first like that, but and then we go back in and we start planting plants that are grown from the native local seeds. So one question I get sometimes is, well, why are you putting in plants? Why don't you just scatter seeds? Wouldn't that have been a lot easier? The problem is the seed resources are so very limited here in terms of what we have on these native seeds. If we throw them out there, 80 to 90% of them in general will be scavenged by other insects and animals, which is a great thing for the ecosystem, but very difficult for us if we are working with finite resources. So in order to maximize the survival rate and just the number of seeds that make it to be plants instead of being food, we start with these plugs. If you know what a seedling is, a plug is a plant that starts as a seedling but spends about another 4 to 8 weeks in the greenhouse, getting even bigger with better root development before it gets put out. The first year, we did not have greenhouses in place to grow all the milkweeds ourselves. We worked with a nursery down in Ada, Cedar Valley Nursery, that had been partnering with Chickasaw Nation for a long time, and they grew out these plants. So every tribe planted 2,500 milkweeds back that first year. You can see here, Osage Nation didn't have any place to put theirs, and they took delivery in their offices. A lot of commitment to doing this. As you can see, these plugs are very nice. They've got excellent root development and are very well adapted. With that nice root development, it means that they can, be less vulnerable and not have to be watered quite as much initially. We have planting days, so every one of the 7 tribes, and when they were putting the 2,500 milkweeds in that first spring, they hopefully cleared their land, hopefully did a good job of it. This is Seminole Nation, Miccosukee Mission, and we would have big planting days, and we would have dozens and dozens and dozens of people, the people from the staff from the other tribes, volunteers from the other tribes. We'd have youth, we'd have elders, we'd have the kids, the Head Start kids. These are just, people from agencies, different state agencies, federal agencies. These were just wonderful, wonderful community events, supported really from all the way from the top on down. I don't know if you recognize that. That's the chief of the Osage Nation, and he was there, really out there planting. That wasn't just a photo op. He was out there planting with those kids and showing them this is how we take care of our land. So, it was just the planting days. They were hot and sweaty, and that's a lot of hard work putting 2,500 plants in the ground in a morning. But anyway, just really wonderful, wonderful things. It was really neat to see the kids get involved. These are youth, Creek youth over at the Morris Indian community. To see the kids really connect with not only getting out there, getting their hands dirty, but to connect with the larger mission of why we were doing this, what had been lost, what needed to be saved, why we were saving it. After the plants were installed, they were mulched to both conserve water and also to prohibit or at least kind of reduce the number of encroaching non-native invasives that were getting into their space. You can see there's a perfect little milkweed. That's Asclepias viridis, the green antelope horn milkweed. That's what we were using. It's the primary monarch reproduction plant for the state of Oklahoma. So watering. Every tribe, as a part of this, as this grant, they got equipment and supplies, and that included mobile watering tanks to do this. However, not all of the sites were easily accessible to hit those mobile watering tanks. So this is Chickasaw Nation did part of their planting down at Tishomingo National Wildlife Refuge. It's within their tribal boundaries, and they wanted to augment some existing native prairie stands. Unfortunately, where they were putting their plants, it was very hard to reach. So Joanne Ryan started out watering these things with these buckets, and then eventually backpack sprayers and some of the Chickasaw staff came to help them. But these people were hauling this water half a mile each way in that hot Oklahoma heat to make these plants survive. Just an awful lot of commitment from people, which was one of the neat things that we saw and have continued to see about this work is we're seeing tribes cooperating, but also agencies and institutions and nonprofits, and it's just been amazing and very inspirational to see how people have come together to get this done. Like this photo's down at planting day at Tishomingo, but we've got a federal agency, we've got 3 or 4 different tribes represented, we've got a university, we've got a nonprofit. Just all the way through, we've just had people come through and help and connect, and it's just been, really a wonderful thing to see. So next part of working on this capacity issue was developing a seed bank for milkweed seeds. So milkweed, again, that's viridis, the green antelope horn milkweed. It's beautiful. It gets kind of a bad reputation from a lot of people, but I think it's just absolutely stunning. So in a good year, in certain locations, you can find a lot of it wild. That's actually at one of our sites, and you can see. I mean, it's everywhere. Unfortunately, what can happen? This isn't such a reliable source of seed as you would think. So, like last year, we had a complete failure because of all the water. The plants just got drowned out after a good pod development. But milkweeds also, they have a tendency, they fluff out and they hiss and they blow away. And as soon as they open up, these awful little milkweed beetles get in, and with those sucking mouth parts, they will actually ruin the seed, and they will literally render it unviable. So to try and increase this amount of seed supply, we had 3 different sites that put in production beds for this. So this was one at Osage Nation that was more of a conventional approach about literally putting this in to grow this seed and produce it as a crop so it'd be available for these kinds of projects. The Chickasaw Nation, I don't have a final picture of this, they put theirs in on their rooftop garden at their cultural center, which I thought was pretty cool. As far as I know, I think it's the only one in the country like it. So anyway, all sorts of different ways you can do this. Next thing about developing capacity is developing a seed bank for those native nectar plants. And that one's a more complex problem. As we all know, monarchs cannot live by milkweed alone. They need those nectar sources to fuel up. So like everything else, this involves just a lot of training. This is down at Chickasaw Nation. They hosted some of our training sessions, and we brought all the tribal representatives from our project, from our team project, and brought people in, and we did classroom training. And if you can see on the upper right part of the screen, we also videotaped everything so that we could create training videos from that. So we did so people had to learn, first of all, how do you even identify which plants are we looking for? How do you identify them? When are they ready to collect? There's quite a bit to learn with this. After that, it was out in the field, and again, all the tribes coming together, and we spent literally over those first 2 years hundreds and hundreds of hours in training together, and it was anyway, and many thousands of miles driving in the car to all those training sessions all over the state. So field work out there, again, just learning, once you're out in the field, how do you identify these plants? When they're ready to collect, it's when they're actually dead. So it's a little harder than it sounds to learn how to do this and learning how to follow proper collection protocol. Once everybody was all trained up, then we would go back and people at different tribes would train the youth, and we would get them involved. Again, with the train the trainer. And then once all those seeds were collected, they had to be cleaned. And again, that sounds like that's an easy thing. It's not. Again, just hours and hours and hours and hours of training of learning how to do this. This is David Krell of Chickasaw Nation, and he was a real master at this, at seed cleaning. So he led an awful lot of our training sessions showing people how to do this. And again, just even learning how to identify which are seeds and which are chaff. It was fun, but it was hard. And but coming together, and so we got Cynthia Highfield from Chickasaw Nation, and Margaret Sisk from Osage Nation, and Dr. Chip Taylor, and that's at Creek Nation, Morris Indian Community hosted that event. Once those seeds are clean, they get weighed and counted, and then we have seed exchange between tribes in the same ecoregion so that people can restore their lands and try and maximize and share resources. As a part of this grant, every tribe got a hoop house. So these are greenhouses, but they're not heated. They were designed specifically for this project because a lot of these sites did not have electricity to them. So these top flaps can be opened with a cordless drill and an extension, so that can open up, and then the doors can open, so you can do that. So if it's hot out, you can open those flaps, and you get good convection and cooling and off, and the sides roll up, and then if it's cold out, sides are down, flaps are down, doors are shut, and so with these little hoop houses and people that had never raised any plants before, we raised over the 3 years of the project over 30,000 of these native nectar plants, and then which got replanted back. Also, a great opportunity for the youth to get involved and learn how that works, and great way to learn science as well. All these plants were tracked by lot number, which related back to the big master list of all the seeds that we had in the seed bank. So tracked by Latin name, common name, species, ecoregion, collection site, collection date, everything. We tried to keep as detailed records as possible with this. So we had something really exciting happen to us in May 2017. The first milkweeds, the first 2,500 for each tribe, went in in the spring of 2016, and in May 2017 we went out to see how it was working. And we had the most wonderful thing, proof of concept, as a scientist would say, because all of those plants that we'd put in the year before were being heavily, heavily, heavily used by monarch caterpillars, which shows that yes, they were needed. Yes, this could work. Yes, it did work. And so it was just the most amazing thing to see that after spending 2 years and thousands of hours on this and all the hard work of hundreds of people, proof of concept, it really was working. So what grew out of that is the tribal lines for pollinators. So the team project was wonderful. It lasted. We had funding to really do that intensively for 3 years. We made great progress, but that was not going to be sustainable on quite that level. So I guess, I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago, about a year into the other project, the Tribal Alliance for Pollinators was formed. And so what we were trying to do with that is to expand the good things of the team beyond the boundary of the original 7 tribes. So with that, we tried to use the lessons that we had learned the hard way over the course of the team project, the resources we had built up, and share that with any tribe that wanted to work with us. So we do technical training with hands-on workshops and conferences. We have supplies, seed bank, equipments, how-to videos, webinars. The equipment is part of a lending library that any tribe can borrow for free. So we have the seed bank, which is one of the things that we're most proud of. It's been a huge investment. It's been a multi-year project to get this going. Colin could tell us exactly how many seed species. I should have looked this up before I started this. Maybe, I don't know, I think it's close to 200 now that we actually have in our seed bank. We just received a National Fish and Wildlife Foundation grant late last year to expand our seed bank. So as a part of that, we now have a machine to clean the seeds for us. Yay. Some of it still has to be done manually, but that's really speeded things up for us. The seed bank, everything is cleaned, weighed, inventoried. We know seeds per gram, how many grams we have, when it was collected, where it was collected. We keep everything within the ecoregion. It's all filed. They're kept in refrigeration. It's a unique resource. It's the only one in the state, maybe the only one in the region, and it's totally nonprofit. So any tribe or tribal member can do that, can take seeds out of that to restore tribal land in Oklahoma. TAP also produces a lot of plants which can be used by tribes that don't have the greenhouses yet to produce these plants themselves. So that's a big part of our mission is to be able to supply these plants for these tribal projects. We do a lot of training. We do training out in the field, of all kinds. We provide supplies so that people can be able to do this. We do hands-on training. We do a lot of that. So here people are learning how to stratify seeds. And small group training. We do classroom training, both large group and small group. And one of the other things we do is we help people get plants in the ground. So we go out there and we help get volunteers, or we send out our own staff. We bring out equipment, and we can help people get those plants in the ground. And and we also just are there, to celebrate and just to be there for each other. And this was part of an open fire dinner at the conclusion of one of our TAP conferences, and just nice after, to come together in community and just be united in this common goal we have of trying to restore the land and save the monarchs and save the pollinators. It's a wonderful thing. So intertribal collaboration on this level, it's pretty unusual because this isn't just agreeing in theory. This is literally tribes coming out to each other's lands and helping each other, sharing resources, just a lot of things, level of commitment. So So what we see with the benefits of these intertribal collaborations, so we can really maximize our resources when we share them, whether it's the technical knowledge, because being able to share and learn from other people's mistakes. Also equipment. We've got an entire lending library of equipment with tribal lines for pollinators, and seeds, because maybe your tribal lands are very, very badly degraded. Well, maybe the tribe next door has, or ones in the region have seeds that they're willing to share, and the seed bank can be a nexus to do that. One of the other benefits of this is enhanced funding opportunities, because granting organizations really like to be able to spread that out and touch as many entities as possible. So we have seen this, that we're much more likely to get funding when we're working with 7 tribes or 10 or 20 than just one tribe going out and trying to get this done on their own. The other thing that's important is that we do have more of a voice when we speak as one. They learned that at Standing Rock, is that we carry more weight politically as a coalition of many nations than as individual tribes. When we had our kickoff planting event for the team with the 7 Tribe Project, it was written up in the Washington Post, also the Huffington Post. But that was something that would not have happened with one tribe going out and putting milkweed. It was because they were coming together, to do this. And about that same time, I think it was like mid 2015, when we were really launching this thing, I had a call from the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, one of the advisors who had heard about this and wanted to know what we were doing. And so I had to write up a briefing about how the tribes were working to try and save monarchs here. So that's a pretty powerful thing, So in just thinking about this and conservation in general, one of the things I think about with it a lot is just a seat at the table. So this photo was taken at the Citizen Potawatomi Eagle Sanctuary. That's where they did their restoration planting. That's Mianabi, who very sadly just recently passed away, but he's been kind of our poster boy for this project. But they chose to do their restoration work there for their monarch habitat stuff, because for Potawatomi people, eagles are very sacred, and butterflies are sacred too. And so, because butterflies take your prayers to the Creator. So they chose to do their work there. And just thinking about that and thinking about how those things were tied, our people, our Native people, have been guarding and revering and protecting these species for millennia. And with that, we really have earned the right to be a part of this conversation about how to save them. We need to be there. We need to be there, and we need to be a part of the conversation. But more importantly, you need us there, because this is a huge battle to try and save monarchs and pollinators. I mean, the scope is just daunting, and it's amazing what needs to be done. Oh my goodness, it's like over a billion stems of milkweed need to go on the ground to save monarchs. Tribes, they have the land, they've got the cultural commitment, they've got the values, and they need to be part of this story. So our story began with a butterfly, but the next chapter of the story is yours to write, and it is all hands on deck. And I hope that kind of just hearing about our story can give you some ideas about how you can write the next chapter to increase monarch conservation in your area. So I hope that our story can help you as you shape your story, because if we can do it, anybody can do it. So all right, with that, I think that is one more thing before I get done here. Hang on real quick. I wanted to, if I can go down here. There we go, I wanted to officially recognize all of our different funders and contributors who have made this possible. We have been so fortunate. BIA, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, USDA, NRCS, National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, Monarch Watch, College of Muskogee Nation, Muskogee Creek Nation, Chickasaw Nation, Monarch Joint Venture, to all of you all, Mado, you have made this possible, and there's also so many others that have helped too. But it's been these kind of ventures, a lot of volunteer time, but they're not inexpensive. So we're just really grateful for all of the people that have contributed, to us and made this possible. So if you want to know more, tapconnection.org. And with that, I will hand it back over to you, Mary.
Oh, thank you so much, Jane. And thank you so much for that amazing explanation of what's going on with Team and TAP and the Butterfly Farm and all the initiatives and the different tribal nations that are involved. I've noticed that we have several questions that have come in on the chat room. Would you like to tackle those from the chat room, or would you like me to read those aloud? Any preferences?
No, you can. Yeah, you can go ahead and read them. You can do that. That's fine because it's hard for me to read them here. So
sure,
yeah,
absolutely. All right, so I will take them in the order that I see them so far. What have you found, Jane, to be the most important strategy to sustain participation and collaboration between different communities?
So that is a really good question. And so here's the thing about this, I will say, is this work, working on this project for the last however many years, 4 or 5 years now, it has been the most rewarding, meaningful work I've ever done in my life. I have made the best friends I've ever made in my life. The work has been profoundly rewarding. That being said, it's hard, and you have to inspire people and connect them to the larger message. You have got to get more people into, it cannot just fall to one person to do this. And this is what we saw with a couple of the tribes, is you'd have one champion who really believed in it, but man, you've got to get other help. So that's one of the things we tried to do, is kind of like almost like have a toolkit to help them, be able to get community volunteers. People want to help. It's a matter of just making those connections. That's not very helpful advice, but just keeping people connected to the larger mission and how important it is. One of the other things I will say about this is with monarch issues or pollinator issues, if you work with them a lot, as I assume everybody on the line here probably does, is it's very easy to just kind of assume that everybody else knows as much as we do about this issue and about how serious it is. And because I'm out there a lot, at working butterfly exhibits and, and at fairs and, garden shows and like different strange places that people aren't normally out doing conservation outreach, because we do this, through the butterflies. What I see is that most people don't know about this. The larger public, they don't know. The word is not out. Even though it's gotten better, the word is not out there. And so trying to do that, so just to make sure that people understand, what's at stake, what needs to be done, how they can help. And that's one of the critical things, is everybody has a role to play here. Even if you're doing nothing but designating part of your yard as a non-toxic zone, or you're going to your church or your school or your place of business and saying, can you please designate a part of our site as a non-toxic zone? There's, and then from there's all sorts of, ways to level that up, from, planting a milkweed plant, putting in a butterfly garden, putting in a monarch way station, really aiding with habitat restoration, trying to assist us with our seed collection efforts. There's just so many things, but people don't know how to help. And once you explain the problem, man, they want to get on board. That's my experience. Even people who aren't typically a part of the conservation community, so to speak, they want to help, but you have got to, one, explain what the problem is, two, have a plan, explain what the problem is, and give people avenues to help, because it's enriching to them to be able to help too. And so one of the things I think about also a lot with conservation work is that it makes you feel good. It makes you feel so good when you can be out there and helping and connecting and helping to save this stuff. And I don't think that should be something that is reserved for just urban and suburban people, or people who are affluent and middle class or upper middle class. That is something that is enriching for so many different people. And I want to make that possible for all sorts of different communities, because we need the help. This is an all hands on deck effort, and it also just makes people feel good to be able to help, and that's a positive in their lives too. And again, I just don't think that should be a privilege. I think that that's something that more people should have the opportunity to participate in, and I don't think Monarch Conservation has done a terrific job with that. So I just want to see more communities included in it. So
awesome. Thanks for that encouragement. We have another question, and it could be sort of a two-parter here. The question comes in as, do TAP members survey the monarch or caterpillar butterfly egg sightings on their property and report them to you? And if so, do you take that data and report it on up to the national observation databases?
Okay, so that is a good question. Initially, we did, because we really needed to get that proof of concept. Since then, since we really do have a proof of concept and our resources are extremely limited, our focus has been on getting plants in the ground. That is our mantra: getting plants in the ground and training people how to get those plants in the ground. So while I adore citizen science, and I think it's terrific that people are doing that and monitoring that, and I know monitoring has an important role to play in this, our emphasis is on plants in the ground. So that's so yes and no. So that's great. We encourage people to do that, but it's not the focus of what our organization does. And I think that truthfully, even if I wanted us to do that, I think there's a lot of organizations that are probably doing a better job with it than we could. And what we do, what we uniquely are able to do with, working with constituencies that have land resources that can get plants in the ground, that's really our focus. So.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, that is an incredibly difficult job to do and do correctly. So for those that are out there trying to do it, we really appreciate that you're out there doing it. For citizen scientists that are doing it and reporting to Journey North, we appreciate you're doing it. But I completely hear what you're saying. Getting those stems in the ground, before you can count them, you got to plant them, right?
Yeah.
This is a question that comes from one of our librarians in Moore, and she asks, what is the minimum number of milkweed plants you would recommend that an individual or a family puts into their home garden for the regeneration of the monarch population? So do you have any advice for people with small spaces?
I do have a piece of advice, which is every bit helps. I have never talked to a person who even just put in as few as one milkweed plant who did not get caterpillars using it. Every little bit helps. So even if you can only put in one, if you can put in more, great. But just even a little plot, you would be surprised, 3 by 3, or even just if you don't even have a yard, just putting some on a pot out in your patio. It will get used. It does make a difference. They will find it. So as this habitat becomes more and more fragmented, these little parcels, the little oases, whether it's a habitat island or if it's just a pot of milkweed on somebody's back patio, or it's a butterfly garden in a school or a church, any of those things, they become critical because every organism has a finite budget for time and energy. And if they are spending, so for instance, say a monarch butterfly, if they are spending all of their time just flying great distances just to find something to eat, those are resources that aren't being spent on reproduction and making more monarchs. So as we see decreased food resources, you have decreased realized fecundity. You just have fewer baby monarchs. So every little bit helps. And so, no, there is not a minimum number. Yes, please do it. And it's a beautiful plant too, And so one of the other things that doesn't get talked about a lot with milkweed is it's, first of all, it's just lovely. It's a very, very pretty plant. But many of the species, particularly like Asclepias viridis, the green antelope horn milkweed, is highly nectiferous. And when it is blooming, it is preferred over almost any other plant out there, native or non-native, as a nectar resources. We see hummingbirds nectaring on them. They did some research out at OSU at the Stillwater Research Range, and where they did the controlled burns, and where the viridis came back, they were saying the bees all preferred it too, to all the blooming wildflowers. So it's a great, it's a great support plant for pollinators. It's essential for monarch reproduction. It's good looking. It's a nice plant. It's native. It's drought resistant. I mean, it's just absolutely a win-win-win all the way around. So
it sounds like it's the heavy hitter. I love it.
yeah.
Well, and I would just add to that at Okies for Monarchs, if space and resources are available to you, whether you have to buy plants, whether you can borrow plants and cuttings from friends, at Okies for Monarchs, we really encourage you, if you can, to put in 2 to 3 species of milkweed. Try to put in at least 10 stems. Again, this isn't a perfect world in a small urban garden or smaller area, patio garden with lots of pots, and then try to surround them by a dozen or so nectaring native plants that are blooming in 3 seasons. So just remember, Jane talked about they need that fuel when they're flying, not just the host plant for laying the baby. So if you can, put in a garden of about 15 things and make them native. Let's put back into the environment what those animals and insects that co-evolved over in the millennia in Oklahoma, what they've lost to the trend we had in gardening for the last 3 decades. Let's try to put some more of that back in. Would you be able to answer this question? This writer is wondering, are you sensing or hearing anything from the White House, from the Fish and Wildlife Administration, on whether or not we might see movement on the listing of the monarch in December of 2020?
So not officially, and I'm not speaking in any official capacity here. It is just my kind of whatever gut sense. And again, I'm not speaking any official. I'm not even speaking as the director of whatever TAP or UT Butterfly Farm now. But I just don't think it's going to happen. I think that there's just so many other things competing for resources out there right now. I just don't think it's likely. Anyway, but we'll see. But if we could all be surprised. So either way, I'm gonna be putting those plants in the ground. So that's what I'm gonna be working on either way. So
there you go. Okay. Well, the work needs to be done. So onward and upward, no matter what the winter counts are each year, and no matter what the administration does. Absolutely. Yeah. Hey, can you speak to, you and I shared ahead of preparing for the webinar a little bit about how your farm and your alliance has been impacted or had to adapt or been set back by the COVID pandemic and the resulting requirements?
Yeah, so that's pretty much a mess, truthfully, for the planet. So for us, officially, we're officially shut down. We're closed to the public right now. We do have staff members that are coming in, 2 of them that come in. They do social distancing. Because we're growing out, whatever, I don't know, 20,000 or more native plants. So maybe 30. I have no idea. Anyway, because I'm not down there in the greenhouse very much right now. But yeah, so they're continuing to work in the seed bank. They're growing out plants that will be used for planting. When it comes time for planting, that's going to be interesting too. So I think the way it will have to happen is we have gas-powered augers. I think people will do this kind of in shifts, like people do social distancing and get the holes in the ground, and other people will come behind and try and drop the plants in. I don't know. It's going to be complicated. We don't want to stop the work, but it is definitely very, very complicated. And a lot of the tribes are even shut down right now, or to minimum staff. So it is just it's going to be not a great year for this kind of work. But we're committed. We're committed to. We will get the plants in one way or the other. It'll probably just be longer work for our TAP staff because we won't be able to get the community volunteers in like we normally would be. So, but we'll get the plants in the ground either way.
Okay, fair enough. And all the rest of us, let's do what we can in our own properties, homes, gardens, patios, in those community areas which we are allowed to go to. We've got another question. If you were to make a recommendation of any other varieties of milkweed or native wildflowers in Oklahoma that you see there's a desperate need to get in the ground in addition to the milkweed your team has focused on? Are there a handful that you would say, whatever you do, please try to put these species in?
Yeah, so Viridis really is here in our state, it is the one that is, the green antelope horn is the one that is used the most by monarchs to lay eggs on. It's also really drought resistant. It's well adapted for a variety of climates. It'll grow in thin, poor soil. There's all sorts of good things about it. The other one that is really good for monarch reproduction that is native to Oklahoma is the incarnata, the swamp milkweed. Mm-hmm. And that's, again, it's really high protein. It's a great plant for the larvae. It's also really showy and pretty. One of the nice things, good things, bad things, it needs to be somewhere that it wants wet feet. So it's like a great thing, like to put, if you've got a drippy window air conditioner, or you've got an area at the edge of a pond or a water feature that is hard to mow, then, this is a really great plant for that, because it's so good for the monarchs. The tuberosa, the butterfly milkweed, it's a really nice nectar plant. It's actually not as good for monarch reproduction. That's actually something that a lot of people don't know. So it's a great plant, great nectar plant, and they will use it. But in general, the larvae only want to eat the blossoms on that because the leaves are not as high of protein. So, and then there are some of the other ones that are, a little bit more obscure, the verticillata and, some different ones. And in the far northeastern part of the state, and even a little bit here in Tulsa County, the common milkweed is the syriaca, Asclepias syriaca, it's tall and it's got beautiful flowers on it. They smell so amazing, and that's excellent. That's the dominant plant for monarch reproduction in the upper Midwest, and so that's also a really good plant to plant. The purpurascens is also, Asclepias purpurascens is also, if you can find the seeds, that's gorgeous, and that's kind of, again, more in the northeast, but that's an absolutely gorgeous plant that's good for monarch reproduction, and also just an incredible garden plant. It's so showy. It's very, very pretty. So
that's awesome. Are there, we got another question, are there other butterflies that it's your understanding are also declining or highly threatened that either migrate through Oklahoma or are native and spend most of their time in Oklahoma?
So my big concern for, and thinking about how do we, support them, is I'm more worried about besides monarchs, which are in terrible trouble, and a lot of butterfly species aren't doing so great. But I'm really worried about our native bees. I'm really, really worried about our native bees here. So one of the things I think about with monarchs is everything we do to benefit monarchs benefits a whole bunch of other species too. I mean, everybody from the native bees to the other species of butterflies, just all the invertebrate, life, even ground nesting birds, so all those efforts, we can get excited and we can rally behind the monarch, but those efforts, they resonate so far beyond just the monarch ecosystem. So think about that if you can with your landscape. I know some people are skittish of bees, but those native bees they're not aggressive. And so just thinking about, leaving some habitat, some bare ground a little bit so they can nest, putting in some nice different mints and different kind of plants. Yeah. One other thing you can do too, if you've got a home sort of butterfly garden that's just fun and also help for butterflies, is there are different varieties of butterflies native here to Oklahoma that eat rotting fruit, which sounds gross, but it's not if you're a butterfly. So so if you do that, so you've got to go, instead of making banana bread with that old banana, is have a feeder out there and see what comes in on it, because it's very cool. And again, for those species of butterflies that are eating, that are, rotting fruit eaters, or is their resources are limited in an urban or suburban environment too. You look out and you like, oh, this is like a sea of green. Well, it's not. It's not alive because it's all poisoned. It's poisoned and it's non-native species. And again, it's just the sea of Bermuda and fescue and non-native flowers that do not support life, and heavy, heavy, heavy applications of pesticide and herbicide, and that environment is not going to support life. And if we keep on down that path, we're really going to get in trouble because, what's happening with monarchs, it's the canary in the coal mine. We notice when 800 million monarchs go missing from the skies, but it is happening just as fast to all these other species that we are not paying attention to. And the different pollinators that make up these ecosystems, they are in just as much trouble, and these ecosystems are fragile and they're complex, and as links in the chain disappear, they collapse. And once they are gone, they are never, ever, ever coming back. 70% of all of our plants on the planet require pollinators, 30% of our agricultural crops. If we lose these, we are in serious trouble, and it's happened in some areas of China where they have mismanaged their habitat so badly and sprayed pesticides so heavily that literally people are hand pollinating crops with little paintbrushes. I don't think any of us want to live in that kind of world. I certainly don't. So, it just okay. I kind of wandered off in the weeds there. But anyway,
No, it's
next question.
No, it's a great point to make. Absolutely. You mentioned putting out some rotting fruit. Certainly, you see lots of things in social media or the news or magazines about artificial bee houses, butterfly houses, putting out watering trays. Do you have any thoughts for those of us out there who are seeing that about putting energy and time or resources into that versus something else we could do that's more natural to just support the pollinators coming through our neighborhood?
Right. So no to butterfly houses, yes to bee houses, and one of the big things, again, putting those native nectar plants in your garden. They're just so all flowers are not created equal, and those that have been really genetically manipulated to bloom a long time and look pretty and resist insects, those are not. They are not going to support insect life. And so if you can just put in a few of these native flowers, it really will make a difference. So, and again, just cutting back on your use of the chemicals in the yard. I've had people more times than I care to even tell you, come in and like, I put in this butterfly garden. I'm not getting any butterflies. And it's like, well, are you spraying pesticide? Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, but only to get rid of the bad bugs. Oh, okay. Well, you just lured them in and you killed them all. It was sort of better if you didn't plant it all together. But is that people don't differentiate, and they're neurotoxins. They're broad acting, and again, these ecosystems are so complex and so fragile, and if we do not respect and take care of them, the consequences are going to be dire, not only for the animals and the plants, but for us too. This is in our own interest as well, because the future of the planet is not going to look very good. I don't want a world for my child and possibly my grandkids someday with no butterflies, with no wildflowers. Gosh, that's a bleak vision. So now's the time. We are literally at a crossroads, and we're going to determine what comes next and what the future looks like. But every single one of us is going to have to get busy and do our part, whether we've got a tiny little yard or we're managing 10,000 acres. It really comes down to individuals to make a decision to take action. It starts with you.
Well, that's a wonderful answer, and I think that's a perfect way for possibly us to wrap up, as well as we have no fresh questions coming in. So if it's okay with you, I am going to officially wrap up our webinar today. I first want to be sure to thank all of the listeners for taking time out of their day and to join us, to join our speaker, to listen in, and to join Okies for Monarchs. We both appreciate very much everything each and every one of you are doing, whether it's just to learn more, to actually go out and work in your community, to go out and work in the field. Some of you are professionals, some of you are amateurs, some of you are moms, teachers, and librarians, and everything in between. So we appreciate what you're doing to expand what you know about helping restore pollinator habitat, as well as to increase the odds of success for both the monarch as well as all the other pollinator species that rely on Oklahoma habitat. As a team, I am truly grateful to Jane Breckinridge for sharing her time and expertise and talent and life lessons with us. So we're very fortunate to have her back in Oklahoma all these years and to share with us today. So Jane, thank you so, so much. I'm also delighted to have the opportunity today just to shine a spotlight on the amazing work of team, of TAP, and of all the tribes that are out there working to restore their native lands and create a more sustainable future for their communities. We are blessed by that amazing, amazing effort going on out there across our state. So with that, we adjourn. I wish you all to have a great remainder of your week. Be safe out there. And as Jane said, go out and plant more milkweed. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mary.
All right. Take care, everyone. Until next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.